Hey guys, so this is part 6 and possibly the last part of the Ballads at Midnight game. Please excuse the noise coming from the baby monitor. So let's get back into it. Chapter 7, A Hesitant Tune. I started modifying the hearth as I waited for him, prodding the branches into position with the ever-trusty fire iron. Once I'm done, I set the fire iron against the mantle where it belongs. I don't need it anymore. I recall a collection of weapons Lucius had stowed away in the underground, and I wonder if he can train me to wield one. Though I no longer need to safeguard myself against him, an unwanted guest will surely have me singing a different tune. When Lucius returns to my side, he's holding a flat frame of wood face down against his chest, and wearing such a somber expression that I expect he's brought me a mourning portrait. The frame is modestly sized, with a width that equals his shoulders and a height spanning from his collarbone to his navel. The wood is the same shade of blackthorn as his coffin, which in itself makes me uneasy. Flame, thank you for waiting. His eyes strode past me to stare at the massive ink stain at the centre of the room. In the whirlwind of our unanticipated romance, I had completely forgotten to clean it up. Ugh. What did you do to my desk? Forgive me. I was looking for a rag to clean it up, but then I heard you screaming, and well, we both got a little distracted after that, I think. A rag? You were looking for a rag? Flame, you spilled a tidal wave of ink on my desk and floor. No rag will be enough to clean it up. Yeah, I suppose we'd want to use some lye soap to lift the stains. If we don't have any, say, why don't I use the tunnels to procure some supplies from the nearest town? While I'm at it, I can even barter for a new instrument to entertain you with. New books for us to read. Lucius tears his attention away from the desk with visible effort. The desk is not that important. It clearly is important, Lucius. I'm truly sorry, and I want to make it up to you. Gives my shoulder an affectionate squeeze. You're good to me. You know, it never occurred to me that a guest can come and go freely using the tunnels. No one's ever used it to come back. Well, then it's a good thing I'm here to think out loud for you, huh? I coax Lucius to sit in his usual velvet chaise, and he slumps down beside me. Firelight dances over the planes of his face. What did you want to share with me? Lucius sighs, runs his hand over his scalp, breaking eye contact. I haven't been able to stop thinking about the events that led to my exile. For so long I believed it was all unjust, that I was suffering an unjust fate, but ever since you found that scrap of parchment? No, ever since I met you. You've encouraged me to reflect on myself, Flame, and I'm no longer certain of my innocence. Funny that you should mention innocence. I recently began questioning the very concept. Good things don't always come to virtuous people, just as evil doesn't always get punished. When the world itself is unjust, one's sense of innocence is not enough to guarantee their safety and freedom. God, just look at what happened to Gillian. Murdered in cold blood for trusting in the goodness of his fellow man. We are not pure, faultless beings, Lucius. When we're placed in a position of suffering, we often need to become worse to survive. It's not strange to become blemished when we fall. You said it yourself that no one is perfect. I know. I knew you might say this, which is why I need you to see what I have brought. I put the pieces of the portrait back together. Its edges are frayed and some parts are still missing, but... He turns the frame face up. I feel myself turn pale as the eyes of the portrait meet my own. The depicted woman looks as if she made from ivory and rose leaves. Her arresting and imperious beauty, her very essence, is masterfully captured in sweeping lines of charcoal and ink. All too well, I know those regularly arched brows and those taunt, slender shoulders. How could I ever forget? Ophelia. Why do you have a portrait of Ophelia? This portrait depicts Queen Hildegard, Edgehaven, the ruling crown for more than 3 centuries past. She was... Oops. Lucius drops his gaze to the floor. She's my mother. Your mother? He told me he was a prince, but... Oh God, Lucius, you were exiled by your own mother? Exiled and cursed at that? Do you need to sit down? I'm already sitting down. We both are. Why does your mother look so much like Ophelia? They can't be related by blood, can they? I studied the feature of the portrait more closely. Like sisters, they share an eerie resemblance. The same full lips, the same apple curve of the cheekbones, the same pointed nose, but slowly I noticed subtle differences. Ophelia loved to smile. Even when she was simpering or sly, she had a lively sense of joy that was contagious to everyone around her. The queen in the portrait has an icy, judging stare and seemed to reverse roles with her viewer as she calculates where to place them. Her head is tilted into a faint angle and something about her dark eyes looked half dead. While I doubt Ophelia is related to Queen Hildegard, I also doubt the resemblance is mere coincidence. In fact, I suspect every single queen over the past 3 centuries bears a resemblance to the woman in this portrait. Isn't it strange, Flame, that we've had an unbroken line of cruel, corrupt crowns? Why do little to better the lives of their people, even when they're previously expressed an interest in breaking the tradition? Surely they cannot all be so weak-willed. They would bend to the demands of their court and the status quo. Isn't it strange that they're not allowed to be depicted in portraits or seen in public? That they're not even allowed to stay in touch with anyone they knew prior to their regency? Almost as if the very act of sitting on the throne compels them to behave in a unanimous way, or perhaps the person on the throne never changes. What are you saying? I admit I'm not sure how to even start explaining my rationale. Start at the beginning, please. I'll try. As you're aware, I've been unable to set foot outside the estate since the moment of my exile. This means I've never had the chance to encounter your Ophelia, but I can tell you what I know of Queen Hildegard. Flame, how widespread is the practice of sorcery in the world outside? Sorcery? I had little personal experience with it, but I don't think it's prevalent. There are small sects of wizardry and alchemy in certain kingdoms. Some royal families keep court magicians. That's all I know. Lucius nods. It was even less prevalent when I was an immortal man. Magic was an elusive art form that few were equipped to pursue. Yet my mother... I was told she began practicing sorcery soon after I was born. She had severe complications when she was heavy with child and nearly did not survive. Being close to death changed her, terrified her more than anything. I always wondered if that was the reason behind the cold demeanour she had towards me, that she harboured a grudge because my very existence nearly killed her once. She barely deigned to speak to me and was quick to hand me off to the servants. My father, the king at the time, showed me that she simply needed to warm up to being a mother. I knew I was wrong when she adopted and doted over 2 young girls. A king and queen, my parents were under an extraordinary amount of pressure to produce continual heirs. Since the idea of giving birth upset my mother so deeply, they adopted Matilda and Artemisa. In secret, to appease their court, the girls resembled them enough to pass as their real children. You did tell me you had sisters. Yes, I used to call them my mother's little pets, and secretly I envied them. They inherited the throne after Hildegard's reign, didn't they, Flame? Tell me more about your mother. Her contempt for me was more notable than Matilda and Artemisa running amok. She was protective of them, never allowed them set foot beyond the palace gates, never allowed them to be seen by outsiders. I became prone to debauchery for a while, drinking to excess, streaking through the hedges, and sleeping with handmaids who were far too old for me. But all these calls for attention were duly ignored, aside from an occasional slap on the wrist from my father. It never hurt. It was a thin, reedy man, and so easily influenced to submit to the will of others. Easily influenced, you sound like you disobeyed him, Lucius. You disliked him, Lucius. No, I should say I never resented him, though I found it difficult to respect him. If he were not the ruler of a nation, such weakness and inertia may have been charming. You've grown up to be very different from him, then. I would hope so. He was far from from an aspirational figure in my mind. Now, where was I? You were talking about being prone to debauchery, sorry. That's right, debauchery. The phrase didn't last long. When I realised I'd continued to be bereft of the attention I desired, all I had left to do was focus on my studies. As there was much to keep me occupied. It was my 13th birthday that one of Queen Hildegard's spells went awry. She buried an entire wing of the palace in noxious mist. Anyone who breathed it in excess withered into a bone-dry corpse, as if all the moisture had been drained from their flesh. Several members of staff died where they stood, and several more had lifelong complications. Difficulty breathing, periodic convulsions, and an internal itch of the skin. Oh God, were you all right? Lucius scoffs out a small chuckle. It's kind of you to ask, but I was nowhere near the wing. My celebrations took place in the Great Hall. I felt the charm of the spell's impact even there. Mathilda was fine as well, because she had snuck down to see me, but Queen Hildegard and Artemisia suffered from after effects of the spell. Artemisia had to have her hand amputated. Oh God, and your mother? Queen Hildegard was bedridden for a long time. My father grew enough of a backbone to forbid the use of magic within castle walls, and news of the decision devastated her. Back then, I had no idea she was trying to accomplish. She never spoke to me after all, though I noticed she accumulated a collective of tomes and talismans. I had just begun sifting through her materials, trying to make sense of what had happened, when she called for me. Not for my sisters, not for my father, me. Lucius exhales a shaky breath, and I give his knee a gentle squeeze. Forgive me, this is a difficult part of my past to relive. This is when things were irrevocably wrong. I never should have agreed to see her. I should have shown her the same scorn she always shown me. She was your mother, Lucius, even if she'd done something horrifying. I understand why you went to her. Still, if this is a difficult subject for you. No, I need you to know the role I played in this sordid fair flame, how complicit I was in it. Lucius' eyes are racked with such a deep, despairing trepidation that I find myself gripping a cushion for support. Complicit all those years ago? What could he possibly have done that would have such a profound effect on him still? In that case, I'm listening. I'm not sure how this is linked to Ophelia, or if Lucius even intends to redirect the conversation to my old friend, but the fact that Queen Hildegard adopted two girls who resembled her, something about that detail tugs at me, like the snag of a fish hook in my mind. My sisters, oh how they so sobbed at my mother's door, begged for entry. It was just Matilda at first, but Artemisia joined her the minute she recovered from the amputation. My mother refused to see them, shunned them with the same coldness I knew so well. I thought I would feel satisfied when I pushed past them into the chambers. She had finally refused them and chosen me. It was like I'd won something. But those wailing little faces, shiny and stained with snot and tears, there was no satisfaction to be had. I only felt sorry for them. They were eager to idolize her. Yes, heartbreakingly so. My mother's bed was the size of a ship, and she was propped up in its corner on a snowdrift of pillows. I remember looking away from her, pliant and observing her through the full-length mirror embedded in the wall. Her reflection looked, well, bright-eyed and pink-skinned, better than I'd seen her in recent memory, though her movements were sluggish as she beckoned to me with wide arms and drowsy smile. Then held me close and cooed over my height. Felt more like being in the embrace of a distant aunt than a mother, but I cherished that thin guise of matrimonial affection anyway. I tried to look impassive as she confided in me. She talked at length about her deep-seated fear of death and her lonely toil of trying to overcome it. She dug under a pillow and produced a book. A juice thing that made my skin crawl. Its cover looked a little too much like it was sewn haphazardly used as scraps of human flesh. She refused to let me take a closer look, but she haltingly informed me that she traded part of her soul to create it. It was an infernal grimoire. My mother, the queen, had become a full-blooded witch straight out of a fairy tale. She told me that the mist was a horrendous accident, that she'd only intended to curdle her own bodily functions as a means of achieving immortality. Apparently, the spell was disrupted when Artemis wandered in at an inopportune moment, causing an eruption of mist in the wing. Though the power of the grimoire was great, she knew then that it was too dangerous and difficult to control. She said that she needed to look into other options. Lucius laughed ruefully. I convinced myself I had no reason to doubt her. My own mother, even then, her explanation made no sense, but I surmised that a half-curdled body was a reasonable cause for a bedridden state. She had asked me to assist her in overcoming the affliction of death. She could trust no one else, and that she would be glad to share eternity with me once we discovered its secrets. What matter of son would I be if I said no? Had she finally worked up the courage to bear the contents of her heart after all this time? That odd sequence of words slicks into place in my mind, the words he screamed from the confines of his coffin. You did everything she asked. I did. I kept the chance to become a research assistant, her little pet. I lost sleep studying ancient tomes day and night. I used every resource available to me, organising expeditions, hiring treasure hunts and informants, all to comb through the farthest corners of the earth for the merest sign of eternal life. Queen Hildegard did her part in the research, but her work had to be discreet. We began spending much of our time here because she was forbidden from practicing sorcery in the main palace. Lucius swings his arms in a slow arc to indicate our surroundings. Our summer estate. She used to call it our mother and son getaway, as if it were a vacation. I stare at him and then I see the chamber in a different light as I follow the gesture of his arm. It's a strange image, the estate as anything other than my new home. I tried to picture Lucius and a woman in the portrait working late into the night, burning candles down to wax puddles. Part of me is anxious to skip the story's end, knowing Lucius's fate all too well. However, a much larger part of me needs to hear how it happened. I need to know what led to Lucius becoming a vampire, exiled and alone in his own estate. One day at last, my efforts bore fruit. A wizened collector of curiosities sold me fragments of an ancient ritual, and she claimed it was one of the oldest forms of immortality, although the full, precise method was lost. We were now graced with some of its steps. It was remarkable timing too. My resources were depleting fast, and the court asked questions that were becoming difficult to assuage. By that point, my mother had become more proficient at witchcraft, though she mainly used it to keep her youth from fading. We were able to use her practical knowledge and my investigative findings to reconstruct the ritual. I picked up on some basics of magic meanwhile, not enough to construct original spells the way she did, but enough to understand how hers worked. It still took years of trial and error. My father and his court continued asking their questions, but it was easier to appease them after I stopped draining the royal coffers. I remember Queen Hildegard being relieved by this. She always insisted she could not be linked to our work. I understood her concern. My father had such an unfavourable stance towards her interest in magic, and I certainly did not wish to see strife in my parents' union. I was fine with lying on her behalf. When we were ready to undergo the trial, my mother bade me to go first. I was so healthy and young compared to her, a frail and anxious old woman. I wish I could say I hesitated to obey her. Everything she asked. The echo of words was sounding less like buzzing locusts and more like a death knell. I thought it was a success. My old scars healed over in an instant. My vision improved, and I dare say I looked a bit easier on my eyes. Yet it wasn't long before we noticed side effects. We had discovered one of the oldest forms of immortality, all right, and its cost would make themselves known. My teeth and fingers were evidently sharper. I could no longer step into broad daylight or enter homes uninvited. And my reflection was simply gone. I lacked the mindless bloodlust that typically accompanied my condition, but no longer being human was a wholly unexpected corollary of the ritual. We had recreated the dark gift in its purest form, flame, the process that allowed the first vampires to roam in eternal darkness. However, in exchange, I lost my privilege of walking amongst mortal men. Queen Hildegard was dissatisfied with the results of my transformation. Despite gaining the power and immortality she craved in her eyes, I was a failed experiment. He leaves a painted bitter pause. She was cold to me again, and I hated it. I knew I disappointed her. I would have given anything to gain her affection. That infernal grimoire. She liked to keep it close, but she couldn't be seen carrying such a ghoulish-looking thing. When she was forced to leave it intended, I seized the opportunity to leaf through its pages. I thought that I could still be useful. I knew she'd be looking into other rituals, other methods of immortality. But the horrors I found in that wretched book, God, the ways she was planning to use all the materials and ingredients I gathered, it sent me into a panic. She was going to take it too far. I wanted to dissuade her, to reason with her, but she was incensed when she learned I touched the grimoire. She punished me. She gathered my most favoured attendees and had them all slaughtered. Everyone who knew about my condition, everyone who would speak out on my behalf, they were all put to death. And then she made me take the fall. My mother dumped the bodies in the wine cellar and bound me to that coffin amidst them. And I understand it. She said I'd killed them. Went on to call me a monster without a shred of remaining humanity, claiming she saved the kingdom from my reign of terror. I don't know what else she told my father or what she specifically said to the court. When I emerged from the coffin, I was alone in the estate and surrounded by the corpses of people I'd held dear. And I drank from them. There was no saving them, but I feel disgusted with myself even now. Lucius had turned from me so as I could only see the silhouetted glow of the firelight on the contour of his cheek. I felt stranded, stuck, processing the grievous enormity of his origin. The room seemed dimmer and colder as the minutes tick on. I don't know what it was like to have a mother, but I know what it's like to crave someone's approval. I can't say whether or not I would have made the same decisions as Lucius, but being born by Queen Hildegard undeniably sent him on a narrow trajectory. I could possibly condemn him for that. There was nothing else you could have done, Lucius. Wasn't there? You blame yourself too severely. Your mother, Queen Hildegard. She led me into the darkness, yes. She took me and delved deeper into the dark arts, but I bowed my head and I followed. She would not hold such power now if I dared to defy her even once. What do you mean now? Lucius glanced at me before scowling at the fire, his hands open and closed in an uneasy rhythm around the picture frame. Lucius, tell me, help me understand. Don't you know how my parents died? Do you know how my parents died? Every orphan from Nightingale Gardens can recite the names and prominent facts of the royal family. Before I ran away, the matrons managed to drill the knowledge into my skull throughout stringent repetition, occasionally via whipping switch across our palms. I haven't thought about Illuvian history in a long time, but I can recall it easily as my founder memories. His Majesty King Frederick Edgehaven died of an illness. His queen never remarried and she died of old age. Died of old age? Isn't that odd? Do you think such obsession with immortality can simply wither away over time? Because she found another way to stay alive, Flame. I know it for a fact. The spells she comprised in her grimoire were horrific, compelling servitude, summoning demons, hexes, plagues. And of course, consuming the life essence of another person. She lives on, whispering nefarious plots into the crown's ear like some evil advisor. I'm telling you that she sits on the throne still, Flame. The spell, when concentrated on a single victim, it takes everything from them. It steals their energy, their youth, and even their face. Everything until the victim shrivels and collapses, lifeless, leaving only the thief with her new body. Memories rush back in a flash. My performance before the Queen's court. I felt the bile rising in the back of my throat. No. I didn't know it then, but I know it now. Queen Hildegard meant to cast it on my sister and misfired due to the immensity of the grimoire's power. It scared her then, made her back off, made her cold towards her daughters. Only then did she seek an alternate method through me. But oh, I'm certain she kept that consumption spell in mind all the while. Perhaps poor Artemisa wasn't a suitable vessel. Even after the second attempt, years after my exile, Queen Hildegard would have to move on to the spare body, Mathilda. But once Mathilda was spent, she would need another body and then another, preferably with faces that resemble hers. She always was terribly vain. No, I refuse to believe it. I stand and find myself feeling dizzy from the abrupt change in altitude. Lucius reaches to me, but I shrug him off. I need my journal. Wait here. I dart out of the room, breathing hard, and claps my hand over my mouth as I try to keep the sensation of sickness from spilling out. I kept the journal underneath my pillow when I don't have it on hand. It doesn't take me long to retrieve it. My fingers are trembling as I slam my journal before us. This. Ophelia sent me this journal a month after she left for the palace. Tell me, Lucius, would your queen wait that long to consume her? Yes. The consumption of life essence is a gruesome spell, but it was the one of her simpler ones. After some reinforcement, Queen Hildegard no longer needed her grandma to cast it. It only requires an amount of the victim's hair as a conduit to be carefully collected over a period of time. Flame, you confirmed it for me when you said it was it yourself. The woman on the throne was not your Ophelia. I knew this would cause you pain. I didn't want to tell you, but I said I would rather be curious. I said I would rather know the truth. There's a throbbing, quivering ache behind my eyes. My thoughts are crashing together and it's difficult to string them into coherent words. My tingling skin feels increasingly numb. All I know for certain is that I have no tears left to shed. You didn't know for certain until you met me. My previous guests were either uneducated or thoroughly disinterested in politics. Many of them could not even read. The crown would be careful not to send anyone who would rouse my suspicion, but she was careless when she met you. You're the only one to have known an Alluvian queen prior to her reign, to have seen her before and after she took the throne, and you know just enough Alluvian history to help me complete this dreadful puzzle. Flame, will you tell me who the crown was after Queen Hildegard? Queen Artemisa Edgehaven. Indeed, did she ever marry? No, she died young and left the throne to her sister. That means Artemisa had no children. What was the name of the sister who ruled after her? Mathilda, Queen Mathilda Edgehaven. She's the one who founded my orphanage. Yes, Nightingale Gardens, named as such for our father's affinity for songbirds. Not that Matilda would have spent enough time with our father to know such a thing. It must have made her very popular indeed when she declared the next crown would be chosen from there, routinely elevating consumers to nobility. She endured herself to her people by choosing an orphan girl as a successor. Instead of the numerous eligible candidates of grand dukes and counts, orphan girls would continue to be chosen for as long as the next monarch upholds the custom. Mathilda didn't have any heirs, did she? To have 3 queens in a row so averse to childbirth, it's a strange pattern for a kingdom that once devoutly emphasized divine birthright. Lucius. And I expect all queens after them remain childless and unmarried, and am I wrong? At first I thought it was delusional for even considering the possibility. I hoped I had too much time to think, to let my fancies get away from me. But when you told me about Ophelia's changed demeanour, I am truly, truly sorry, Flame. It brings me no joy to reveal the truth, but I knew I'd be wrong to withhold it from you. So you tell me that this centuries-old witch has been using my orphanage as some sort of body-snatching orchard where she can freely take her pick? All that bullshit about generating us for guaranteeing us a place in high society, all a front for the queen, so the queen could secure someone who looked similar to herself. That Ophelia wasn't selected for intelligence or for any of her virtues, but so she could be sacrificed to the queen to wear her face. It's too horrible to accept. As my hands curl into trembling fists, my nails dig deep. Half-moon gouges in. My nails dig deep half-moon gouges into my palms. The anger crackling through my bones is as ridiculous as it is unbearable. My emotions are useless and fervid, like a bonfire caught under a downpour. The throbbing ache behind my eyes feels increasingly hollow. Ophelia is dead then? She lived on only in my thoughts because that thing murdered her and took her place? I feel like the biggest fool in the land. No, Flame. Am I not? I spent so long feeling sorry for myself, so long missing her and crying like a child. All this time she was never even alive to know it. What did she ever do to deserve such a fate? Why her? Lucius gives me a long, pained look. We both know the reason. Neither of us wishes to voice it aloud now. As if this senseless tragedy caused by a self-serving witch would hurt less this way. I let her a bitter, mirthless laugh, pressing my palms against my eyes. To think that I'll never see her again. Not the real her, I correct myself quietly. Flame, look at me. Lucius sets the portrait down, shifting to kneel before me and catching my gaze, but I can't even meet him halfway. My vision is swimming, pitch black on the edges as I glare at the portrait with newfound hatred. He stares back at me with those dead eyes, dark and domineering. This wretched woman, this witch, stole Ophelia from me. She stole the throne from her own son, and if she isn't stopped, she's going to steal the futures of countless more girls. But what can I possibly do to stop her now? This humiliating powerlessness makes me realize why Lucius tore the drawing to shreds. I'm tempted to seize it and launch it right into the fireplace myself. Could I have helped her escape if I'd known the truth sooner? Is there anything I could have done to save Ophelia? Does anyone know how much evil this woman has inflicted on her own kingdom, aside from the vampire prince she's forsaken? Lucius gingerly takes my hand in his own, but I'm too numb to reciprocate. The artist took great pains to draw attention to her loathsome face. Did Celia know how vile of a beast he'd captured on parchment when he rendered her likeness? He knew she was my mother and that she was the one who banished me, but he never learned the full content. You're the only one I've trusted enough to... He trails off, perhaps second-guessing his decision to confide in me. Part of me wants to smile for him, even though I will waver, to soothe him even through my voice will crack, but I'm still unable to tear my eyes from the portrait. The delicate lace trim on the dress and the gemstones on the Queen's crown have been smudged, but her pendant was carefully carved into the parchment with dark, determined lines. I squint harder at it. How hadn't I noticed it before? Keep safe. What? The symbol, Lucius. What is the meaning of this symbol? I reach for the portrait, then think better of it and flip open my songwriting journal for him. There, on the first page beneath the leather-bound cover, is a red ink design that matches its charcoal counterpart. The bejeweled pendant is circled by a knotted half-wreath of thorns. What? Lucius lurches as if he meant to stand, but bends back down to study my journal with increasing agitation. What? It can't be! His eyes are wide and darting as he looks at me, caught somewhere between pleading and thoroughly rattled. Flame, can I take a closer look? My throat clenches tight with instinctive apprehension. I've never allowed anyone to look at my journal. Touching it has been completely out of question. But I need to know the truth. I want to trust Lucius to help me find it. All these years of keeping the journal safe, of keeping myself safe, I wonder if I've been waiting for the reckoning in this very moment. With wordless reluctance, I place the book in his weighted hands. Lucius immediately stands, pacing and holding it with uneasy reverence. He turns his pages more hastily by the second. Why do we even have this? How long? You've written all over the damn thing. He tangles his fingers through his hairline, leaving frayed, frazzled strands in his wake as he flips back to the inside cover. Lucius faces me with a mystified scowl. The symbol is the symbol of her pact. The deal the Queen made when she sacrificed part of her soul to augment her magical powers to make this. He shut the book and holds it up, shaking it with grave emphasis. Her infernal grimoire. But this cover is different. Why is its cover different? What happened to it? You took it everywhere, Flame. Through mud and prison cells and tavern brawls. God in heaven, you had it with you when you were performed before my mother. Wait, what? Wait, what? Slow down. How could it be the same grimoire? It was completely blank other than Ophelia's note to keep it safe. Or to keep myself safe. I was never quite sure which. Lucius humours me by re-examining the inside cover of the book. After a moment, he scoffs out loud, then begins to laugh. flating in beside me on the velvet chase. He laughs and laughs. His sagged shoulders quiver with bone-waving hysteria. The fates are terribly fickle, aren't they? You weren't wrong about her after all, Flame. Your Ophelia was as sharp as a knife, and it seems she did her part in changing Alluvia's future. She did? Lucius taps the book a few times against his palm as if he's reluctant to part with it. Still, he doesn't take longer than a heartbeat to hand it to me. This is all you have to remember her by, isn't that right? You should hang on to this book. You've been marvellous about caring for it thus far. There's no reason to stop now. There's a small confused pang in my chest as I accept it from him. I leaf through its pages, marvelling at what secrets they must hold. First she steals food from an orphanage, then she steals a grimoire from a witch queen. It sounds par for the cause, wouldn't you say? Mother must have been furious. I linger on the inside cover one more time. Keep safe. As I bore down on those benign little words, Lucius drags his forefinger along the inside seam. You see this? This thread is exposed and loose here. Its colour doesn't match the rest of the book. Ophelia must have waited for the Queen to leave the grimoire unattended, much like I did. She placed this cover to hide her swapping ruse for as long as possible. Even if the Queen sent her entire army to search for the grimoire, they would not know what to look for. They would not know its new appearance. But be that as it may, why in heaven would Ophelia go through the trouble of stealing it and sending it to me? If she discovered the Queen's scheme, why didn't she flee the palace to save herself? You knew her much better than I ever will, Flame, but let's say she did successfully escape despite the Queen's best efforts to hunt her down and detain her. What do you think would have happened afterwards? Your mother is relentless, isn't she? If so, she would have found another girl, someone else, who would have suffered in Ophelia's place. Would your Ophelia have allowed that to transpire? Another pang ripples from my chest. A choked noise escapes me as I part my lips to speak. Lucius reaches out once more to hold my hand, grounding me with a sympathetic grip. A faint thought crosses my mind like a whisper, that he or all probably knows what it's like to lose someone he loved. I feel my fingers just enough to gently squeeze back. I feel I like to inconvenience others sometimes, but she would never want it to cause actual harm. She would have done anything in her power to avoid it. I suspect as much. Beneath her veneer of being a cunning little scoundrel, I believe you said she was kind. Perhaps this prompted her to send the grimoire to the only orphan in Alluvia, who both despised Nightingale Gardens and was fiercely protective of her belongings. So protective, in fact, that she refused to trade her loot to a vampire in exchange for her freedom. I think Ophelia trusted you to resist those in power, Flame. My lips quivered. I look away from him in haste, and mercifully, he no longer pleads with me to make eye contact. All these years of carrying around this wretched book, carrying out the command of those hastily scrawled words, it was really gratifying, but it always felt so stupidly important. But now Lucius is telling me that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't as stupid as I thought. I didn't know if his speculations are true, but his logic has a sense of significance and faith. I have to admit, it's appealing to hear. In the reality of what happened, aligns with what he believes. There's a reason she didn't destroy it, isn't there? The grimoire, I mean. You don't know. How would I know such thing? I'm not the witch's research assistant. My tone is snappier than I intended. Forgive me. Magic was not uncommon, but I thought precautions against magic were fairly rudimentary. I truly meant no offense. I forgive you. I'm sorry too. I didn't mean to tease you, but it seems it did not land. His lips quirk into a half-hearted grin. When our banter is a short-lived slip into normalcy, you can tell I'm still hurting. Destroying a grimoire releases the power contained within. The Queen's soul will be restored, and she will be free to create a second grimoire. When I was mortal, we refrained from destroying books for this very reason. One never knows if an infernal pact is sealed in its passages. Keeping grimoires far away from the wielders is the best way to cut down their power, and you performed that task splendidly. Ophelia will be so proud of you. I exhale a sharp shuddering breath that grazes the inside of my chest like a wreath of thorns. This is my cue to break down into impassioned sobbing. I think, mourning every memory and lost memory I failed to treasure with Ophelia was alive. Although I picture myself in that state of breaking beautifully, my tear ducts remain relentlessly, shamefully dry, and my mind is once more abuzz with growing noise. Can we use this, Lucius? The grimoire? Is there anything in here that can restore my friend? Lucius' eyes crinkle with inward anguish, but he does not look away. He meets my wavering gaze with steely resolve. Queen Hildegard was interested only in prolonging her life, not in cheating death. She never worked on such spells to my knowledge, and I myself only studied it in passing. Last I heard, necromancy is a ghastly, unrewarding art form. You can restore one's body, but a spirit once departed is lost for good. I see. I suppose Ophelia wouldn't want to come back anyway, not if it means losing an integral part of who she is. That's why I need to tell you myself if I want to move on. What should be the point of remaining a corpse if it didn't have her in it? In my own way, I already mourned her that day she left the orphanage. Perhaps some part of me never stopped. Still, it's crushing to accept that this loss is a permanent one. Lucius watches me for a while, shoulders slumped. Flame, if I may offer a rather more selfish suggestion, there are other spells we may use to our benefit. Lucius hesitates before carefully correcting himself. To my benefit. Even now he's exercising restraint, folding his arms against his chest with humility, when he embraced me with such passion not long ago. It reminds me of how he kept his distance at the start of my stay, and in an alarming dedication, I realize he's holding himself back out of consideration for me. Both then and now, he wanted me to feel safe enough to say no. I was afraid he would hurt me when I first met him. My biases formed by the outside world ensured I would fear him when I met him. I was so afraid that he would hurt me that I felt little desire to understand him. Yet now that I know him, I'm beginning to suspect that my feelings for him border on violent adoration. There's no better antidote to fear than that. My heart remains heavier. I suspect it will remain that for some time, but somehow at the same time, it is full to bursting as I lean in closer to him. I can feel his lashes against my brow as our foreheads softly meet. Flame. My feelings towards you are unchanged, Lucius. I care for you still. Thank you for sharing everything with me. Can't imagine how hard it must have been to make that decision. Why do you look so surprised? I was never upset with you. You know. You weren't the one that killed all those girls. You didn't kill Ophelia. But He trails off when I wrinkle my nose at him, possibly because he knows how viciously I would argue with him if he tries to list any self-accusatory crimes. You have a unique talent in making me reconsider what I'm about to say. You even render me speechless sometimes. Ha! Sounds like I was right. Allow me to settle this saying this, Flame. I do not wish to ask anything of you. I love you, but I know you will need time to grieve. I will. I'll have plenty of time to do so after you tell me how we can use the grimoire to your benefit. Very well. If I remember correctly, the grimoire contains a spell that was used to bind me to the coffin. Is that so? So you could benefit from binding me to keep you company as a cursed coffin companion? My voice is a bit less teasing than I expected, and Lucius doesn't take the hint, looking horrified. No, Flame, don't be foolish. Absolutely not. I would never wish such a fate on you. I'm saying that I may be able to break the curse if I can study how it works. You can do that? I believe so. I have no talent for devising my own spells, but reversing one is far simpler than casting one. Lucius, that would be incredible. That means no more claustrophobic night terrors, no more painted grimaces. What else? My thoughts race and tangle with possibilities, but they all arrive at a single, resounding conclusion. Lucius, you'd be able to leave the estate, wouldn't you? We could leave together. The tunnels would be a daunting venture, but yes, if this works, I would no longer be bound to the estate. I could accompany you if you would still have me. Of course I would. I paused for a moment, collected my thoughts, my grip firm on the journal. What about... I gesture at him, uncertain. With a small, pained smile, he shakes his head. No, even my mother couldn't reverse it, and as strange as it may sound, I don't think I would wish to not be a vampire anymore. It's been part of who I am for so long. If I lost this, I'm afraid I wouldn't know how to be myself anymore. Gently put my hand on him to squeeze it. On his to squeeze it. I understand and I love you the way you are. Sorry for asking. No need to apologize, Flame. Your curiosity was legitimate and I know you meant well. Even so, This time, he is the one stopping me from saying nonsense by pressing his lips against mine. Overwhelmed by a lot of conflicting emotions, I close my eyes to deepen the kiss. Everything is still a little fuzzy in my head. The Queen, Ophelia, the spell book, but at least I find comfort in being with Lucius. My hand slides through his hair, clutching it between my fingers to keep him from moving away from me. No matter what lies ahead, at least we will be together. Breaking the spell was no small task. It wasn't much help and Lucius' memory was distant and fragmented, but with time and patience we managed to decipher all the spells in the book until we found the right one. Part of me was unwilling to trust anything from that cursed grimoire, but I could sense how eager Lucius was to attempt it. Despite my reservations, I couldn't keep him waiting. Every night his cries reminded me of what was at stake. Whatever happened could not be worse than what was already enduring. My fears were baseless after an exhausting ceremony that required far too much blood for my liking. Lucius was released. His curse lifted, his coffin burst into flames, leaving only a pile of ashes behind as a reminder of his long suffering. Although I knew that nothing kept him in his old prison anymore, it took him several days to attempt walking through the tunnel. The water still depressed him, and only my presence at his side gave him the strength to venture under the moat. Hand in hand, with both of us now free to travel, I took him to the neighbouring kingdom. It was my greatest joy to show him the most astonishing wonders I'd seen in the vast landscapes that had been missing for so many years. I could tell by the worry in his gaze every time I got sick that he regretted my mortality, but he never questioned the decision, and I loved him all the more for it. My mortality made every moment sweeter, and I savoured each one knowing it would only ever experience this life with Lucius once. Our life together was filled with discovery and adventures. From city to city, from forest to mountain, from tavern to tavern, nothing could stop us from travelling the world. The only blemish on our bliss was the memory of the odious queen of Illuvia, of whom we sometimes heard news. Every time we heard her name, shivers took over my body in those moments. Desire for revenge obscured everything else. We planned and we plotted. After all, the loss of her grimoire had made her powerless, while Lucius's abilities gave him immense power, and yet the risk of defeat still existed. So every time I ended up changing my mind for one, I was not ready to look at this usurper in Ophelia's body. But most importantly, I knew that it was not Ophelia I would have wanted. She would have wanted me to enjoy every moment of this life with Lucius, and I had earned every moment of this life with Lucius that I had earned, and she would be heartbroken to see it consumed by rage. I would not let it come to that. Our life would be consumed by love instead, a powerful love, worthy of most beautiful ballads, a love deep and true, an eternal love. Freedom and human. Oh, got my coffee. Well, this was a really nice game. I actually really enjoyed this. I don't usually play story-based games, but because you gotta talk a lot, you gotta read it out. But I really enjoyed this, and the artwork is really, really nice. Yeah, I like this. There we go. Thank you for playing the game. If you liked it, consider checking Imperial Grace. Oh, apparently I have another one. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. We might have a look at that next time. Well, this has been a brilliant series. So I'm going to say thank you for watching, and we will see you in our next video. Good night.